What do you do when you struggle to understand what resilience truly is? Welcome to another episode of Life Jack, the Resilience Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rowe, and in this episode, I am thrilled to welcome a remarkable guest who exemplifies resilience and intentional living, Stu Crum. Stu first captured the spotlight as a college football hero and was drafted by the New York Jets in 1983. He has since made a name for himself in the corporate world, holding key positions at Texaco, Shell Oil, Jiffy Lube, and Bridgestone. Known for his dynamic leadership and strategic thinking, he has navigated complex negotiations with influential figures like activist investor Carl Icahn. In his book, Aim for the Upright, the intentional playbook for success in faith, family, and business, which was just released on July 9th, 2024, Stu shares his unique approach to achieving success through a simple yet powerful game plan he calls intentional living. On this episode, we'll explore his journey of overcoming setbacks, embracing faith, and how we can all put our aspirations within reach. So let's dive into this inspiring conversation with Stu Crum.
Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were life jacked.
Hi, Stu. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
I am wonderful, Dr. Rowe, and I am honored to be on your show and excited to talk about intentional living with you tonight.
Yes. I'm so excited for you to be here as well. Can you share a bit about your journey from college football and then to the corporate world? And then, of course, you had the NFL mixed in the middle of that. And then out of all of those experiences, how did that shape your view on resilience?
Yeah, so, as a young boy, I was, like a lot of young people, you see today, I was very driven. And from the time I was 13 years old, I actually thought to myself, I want to play professional football. Now, there was one little problem. Is my mother was 5'2", my father was 9, which does not make a dynamic athlete as you grow up in size. But,
Right.
I was a place kicker. Yeah, I was a soccer player, actually. I started honing my skills to become a place kicker. At 13 years old, I was kicking a football in the basement of my house during the winter. In the summers, I was practicing, and very fortunate. My senior year in high school, I was given a full football scholarship, which back 40 years ago, I am a few years older than probably a lot of folks listening. 40 years ago, place kickers weren't valued like they are today. But I received a full scholarship, and then my goal was still to play in the NFL, and I was very fortunate. In 2019, drafted by the New York Jets. And I played off and on in both the NFL and USFL for 3 years. And I guess the one thing I learned about resilience, my senior year in college, I detached my retina. And I had to sit out the entire season. Devastating, as you can imagine, having to sit out an entire season for that. But what it taught me was how to be really resilient in a difficult situation. And I came back my 5th year. I worked my master's degree, which the university paid for. I was very fortunate. And I had a record-breaking season. So I learned very early on in my career that when life gives you lemons, you just make lemonade. And you figure out a different path to your ultimate goals, whether that path puts some lemons in the way in the beginning. So briefly, that's my story there.
I love that. I love that you say when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, because that's in my intro of every episode.
Ah, love it. Love it.
Right? Is that in my intro? I say sometimes life gives you lemon, and sometimes it gives you lemonade, and sometimes it gives you something entirely out of left field that makes you say WTF. So I understand
That's
that.
right. Yeah,
Now,
that's
you said
great.
you said you faced injuries during your time playing football, and I know I'm a former athlete. I ran track, and I know sometimes like having an injury can be devastating and almost career ending. I know for me, I tore my quad, and after that in high school, I just decided, hey, I don't want to run anymore. The recovery was brutal. It was painful, and I mean, of course, maybe because I was just a young teenager, and I just probably just didn't want to do anything else, and I probably was floating on to something else. Who knows? But those things, those injuries, how did those challenges influence your leadership style and your approach to setbacks?
Well, I think just about everybody in their life experiences setback, failure, right? We don't win every game. But I think there's something to be said for learning how to win graciously and how to lose graciously. I think in our political arena today, we certainly can teach a few folks that. But I learned very quickly on in my life that as an athlete, I had to compete, but I had to compete the right way. And it really taught me and trained me up to become an executive. I'm now a 5-time CEO, and I lead through servant leadership as a style of leadership. I care more about the people than I care about making money, though ultimately, we all have responsibility to turn a profit. But I think I put my people first. And I think all of that, comes from the fact that I learned very young that being empathetic as an athlete and learning from setbacks that I had very early on that I could be empathetic to other people. And when times get tough in business, and all of us that are running businesses find difficult times, rather than panic, I think you pause, listen to your inner self, and you put a plan together for the future. And I had to do that as an athlete. As I said, I tore my retina my senior year. I also, when I came back from that injury, I tore my hamstring because I'd been sitting essentially for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I tore my hamstring again my first year as a professional athlete. So all those times that I had those injuries, I had to pause, and I had to think, what are my next steps? How do I improve, and how do I become a better person? And it certainly has taught me a lot of leadership attributes in my entire career.
Now, you have this concept called intentional living. So can you explain this concept of intentional living and how it became a foundational principle in your life and essentially your work?
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying in my life, because when I started writing a book that I've written, I really started as a leadership book. But what I realized is it's the whole person that I've been trying to develop all 4 years of my life. So my intentional living wasn't just in business. It was also in my family. I've been married for 39 years to a wonderful woman, and we're a team. I've got 2 wonderful grown children and 4 grandchildren. And I'm very intentional about being a grandfather today. And I'm very intentional about my faith. And, a lot of people go to church and they live their faith on Sunday. I try to live my faith 24/7 in everything I do. So I guess intentional living certainly meant to me that in everything I was trying to do, I was setting a goal. And I came with 8 points. I won't go through them all because we don't have that type of time. But the 8, briefly, are purpose, defining a purpose. Becoming a successful athlete was my original purpose. Then my next purpose, be a good businessman, great father, great husband. I had to create priorities, and allows you to take deliberate actions towards achieving what you want. I had to learn how to work through distractions. I had distractions and injuries, so eliminate those distractions. You got to have harmony in your life. You always have to be self-reflective, because sometimes your goals do change. The last 3 are just responsibility. decisions have consequences. You got to be accountable for your decisions, right or wrong. The seventh is grit. To stay motivated, you got to forge ahead, rain or shine, because we are going to be given lemons in our life. And last is you got to smile. You got to maintain a positive attitude, because life is too short not to have fun. And so I've taken those, if you will, those 8 principles of intentional living, and everything that I do, I try to be very intentional with. It's not by accident. I think I have good kids because my wife and I were very intentional as we raised our children. So a very focused approach to life, I guess, is the best way to say it.
I love that. I love that intentional living. And I truly believe that. I believe that if you really do want something or believe in something, then you have to be intentional about it. And so I really like that your book embodies and explains all those 8 principles. And so do you think if someone follows all these 8 principles within your book, that it really can help individuals lead a more balanced life?
I really do. I have never set a goal for myself to be rich. That's not, in my book, I don't talk about rags to riches or anything. It's really about finding peace in my life, happiness in what I try to do. And I honestly believe, and I've lived it for, as many years as I can remember, that I have balance in my life because I never put too much focus on my business. And, in my early years, I always recognized, back when I was early in my career, just a quick story, personal computers didn't exist. So I'd go to the office, I would work, I would come home, I'd put the kids to bed, I'd have dinner with the family, I'd give the kids baths, and I went back to work because the only computers we had were sitting at the office. I was very intentional. I knew I had to be a great dad, but I knew I had work to do. And so, last quick just anecdotal story is I love golf, but I knew that I couldn't be a great father and be a great golfer because golf on a Saturday takes about 6 hours by the time you get there, play, and get home. And so I gave up golf for 20 years so I could be a better father than a golfer. Those are all very thoughtful things that I did. I'm not patting myself on the back for it, but it was very purposeful. And I think because of that, it has led to a life that has been fulfilling. And I think anybody that wants to have that life certainly can be thoughtful about their intentions and why they're doing what they're doing, ultimately trying to achieve whatever that goal is they have in mind.
Now, as I was reading your book, and yes, I love the principles, and I really found a lot of them that I resonated with throughout reading the book. But I have to talk about the chapter, the X Factor. And in the chapter called X Factor, you have a section and it's called Quit to Begin. Now I have a hard time quitting. Right? I'm not a quitter, right? I'm an athlete, right? So I'm not a quitter, even though I did quit track and field, but for the most part. But what in the world does that mean?
Well, and I got to put context around it, and it's really quit to the beginning, and that context is about my son. So I live in Texas now. I'm not from Texas, but I live in Texas now. And when we moved here, my son wanted to play football, and he was 7 years old. And we got him on the football field. The first practice, these coaches were treating these kids as they were 18-year-old seniors in high school.
I know. I have to say almost definitely, because I know in Texas, football is king, because I'm in Texas too, because I don't play about football.
So right, and I was just appalled by the things they were asking these 7-year-old children that were second grade to do. So at the end of the football season, my son had a great season. He quit. I said, I'm not going to put my son through this. I'm not going to live vicariously, having coaches live vicariously through the kid. And he didn't start playing football again until he was in 8th grade. But here's the lesson behind it. If you're an athlete, you're an athlete, right? And my son, who picked football back up and actually was in 7th grade, became the starting quarterback by the time he was a sophomore in high school. He made varsity. And he was starting as a junior in Texas 6A football, and he went on to the semifinal state championship. So he quit to win. And just one last quick story, which also expressed kind of quitting to win. When he was 12, he was a good little baseball player. He said, "Yeah, I'm tired of baseball." I said, "Great. What do you want to do?" He said, "I'll play tennis." I said, "Great. Let's play tennis." And he quit playing baseball for 2 years. At 14, he looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's my buddy. Let's play baseball again." I said, "Great. Let's play baseball." So I wasn't pushing him. Well, make a long story short, James Clayton was drafted by the Chicago Cubs the year in high school. He threw a 93-mile-an-hour pass and went on to play professional baseball for the Tampa Bay Rays. And this is a kid that I didn't push because I want him to have the X factor. We see so many parents today pushing their children, and I wanted my children to have a passion themselves. And I was going to support whatever they wanted to do. So we quit so that he could get the passion to win. And in both instances, it was the right decision. And he ends up becoming a really neat young man, a cool kid, because we didn't push him to do things he didn't want to do at the time.
And you emphasize the importance of faith in your life, and I really appreciate that. People don't want to talk about their faith, right? They feel like it's a taboo topic. But how do you believe your faith has played a role in both your personal and professional successes?
Yeah, so my faith drives everything I do. Absolutely, I wake up every day and ask myself, WWJD. What decision do I make that is honoring or not honoring God? And I've been doing that for my 40-year business career. I've done that with family, and I've done that as raising children and a husband and wife. And I think what's important to me is it's creating a moral compass. I think I said earlier, I will not win at all costs. I just won't win at all costs. There's a right way to win and a wrong way. And when I get beat, and I hate to get beat, like you, I'm a competitor, right? I'm an athlete. But when I do lose, I lose graciously. Not happily, but graciously. And my faith in God has been literally a compass for everything I've done in my life. I've actually, I spent the last 10 years, I've been a CEO for 3 private equity-backed companies. And if you know anything about private equity, the owners want you to drive the business so they can sell the business and make money. And the last company that I was a CEO of, the owners were one of the largest investment banks in the entire world. If I said the name, everybody knows them. And one of the board members said, Stu, you're just too nice a guy. You're just too nice. You treat people too nice. And I thought, when we sold the business, the investors got a 4 times return on their investment. I said, well, if that's too nice, then I'll continue to be nice, right? And so I guess what I'm saying, my faith is everything I do, I tell people I put my Jesus filter. And if it doesn't feel like it's the right thing to do, I just won't do it. I'm uncompromising in my belief and my faith. And I've been that way since I came to a faith back when I was 19 years old, a freshman in college. And it's been a driving factor in my entire life, and it will continue to be. I hope that answers your question.
No, absolutely. So you mentioned the idea of living for and not through your kid.
Right.
So can you elaborate on what that means and how exactly does that impact the family dynamic? Because I have 3 sons, and I feel like most of the things I do is for my kids.
Right. Yeah. So my wife and I were very purposeful early on that we were going to commit our lives to raising nice children, not raising great athletes, even though I happen to raise a great athlete, children that had good hearts and were good people. When I talk about, the intentionality of raising children, go back to the story that I shared. I didn't want to live vicariously through my son or my daughter. My daughter was a great dancer in high school. If they wanted to do it, I was going to be supportive of them. And I was going to open up the doors I needed to open. If they needed private lessons, I was going to make that available to them. But I wasn't going to provide that if they didn't have the desire and passion to do it. What I have found so often, and you see it a lot in Texas, we're both in Texas, is a lot of kids are playing not because they want to play, but they're playing because mom and dad want them to play. And they don't have the joy. I think it's a great example of my son, once again, quit baseball at 12 and picked it back up at 14. And he ended up being one of the top players in the state of Texas. And being drafted once again by the Chicago Cubs as a senior in high school. Why? Because he wasn't doing it for dad. He was doing it because he had the passion. He had the effort. He was excited about doing that. And so my coaching to all parents would be, support your children, even push your children if they need a little pushing. But don't live vicariously through them, because if the children want to do it, they're going to eventually develop that X factor. If they don't want to do it, they're going to do something else they're passionate about. So supporting your children, whatever those passions are. And I found, and now a parent of a 32 and a 34-year-old, that really neat young people now that, and by letting them make those decisions early on, I think it paid dividends for them as adults.
Oh, no, that's awesome. Now, starting over can be daunting, especially in the business world. And I know each time, although you've been a CEO of companies, but it's still like starting over because you're entering into a new company, new people, new team, new culture, right? New mission, new vision. Right? So
Absolutely.
what advice do you have for individuals looking to reinvent themselves or even perhaps change careers, right? Because you went from being an athlete into being, an executive in corporate America. So what advice can you give to people?
Yeah, one of the biggest changes for me is 10 years ago, we're in 2024, 11 years ago, I was president of the largest tire and service company in the United States. I had 24,000 teammates with a $4 billion fed. And I left that company, which was very comfortable, didn't have to worry about cash, treasury. We were a big behemoth company, to step into private equity because I just felt like I wanted to change my life. And what I learned was all those things that I'd learned the previous 30 years in business, working for a publicly traded company, I was able to take that toolkit and take all those tools that I had learned over those into becoming a CEO of a $100 million company. Now, I know a $100 million company still seems big, but when it's compared to a $4 billion company, and now I've got 550 employees, or we call them teammates, not employees. At the time, I had 23,000 teammates, right? And I had enough confidence, and I was bold enough to step out of that very big comfort that I was living in to do something because I just wanted to build something from the ground up. And I've done that now twice, where I've built something from the ground up and then eventually sold the business. And so, if you really have a desire to do something, I would say step out of your comfort zone and do it. But the only caveat I'm going to say, make sure you're prepared. At that point, my children through college, I'd actually had both the children married. So financially, I didn't have to worry about the children's education anymore. I didn't worry about the wedding anymore. So I could take a little more risk. And I think the only thing I caution people is don't risk things to the degree it's your family, right? Be thoughtful about the decision. I could take that risk, and that risk, to be honest, was paid dividends for me. But it was very calculated, and I was very thoughtful before I made that decision.
And you've developed a following through your weekly Stu Speak email. What inspired you to create this platform? And within it, what kind of messages do you hope to convey to your audience?
Well, I tell you why I started. When I took my second large job, I used to be president of Jiffy Lube, but that's a franchise business, so the franchisees actually don't work for you. But the next job I took, was president of Bridgestone Retail Business, which is the Firestone and Tires Plus stores. So there are 23,000 teammates. And we were in 50 states. We had 2,300 stores. I thought, how in the world am I going to communicate with them? I want them to know my heart. I want them to know me as their leader. So I developed a weekly update on a Friday. I would send out a note that I'd written sometime that week before. And it was always inspirational, and it was always challenging to them. So, there might be a note in servant leadership and what servant leadership meant to me, because I wasn't the only leader in the company. I had 4,000 leaders in the company, and so I wanted them to adopt servant leadership as a way of managing their team. Or then maybe I'd write something on integrity. I think integrity and character are so darn important in business, when it's still lacking today. In particular, once again, in the political arena. And so I would write a note on the character, what character means, and do the right thing, even when no one's looking, right? And then I would write a note. So for the last 11 years, I've been writing a weekly note to the team because I wanted to know what Stu's all about, but I also am encouraging and challenging them to be better people. And funny enough, I took those 125 pages worth of notes I'd written, then put it into a book. And so if the listener was to read my book, they'd find there's 18 chapters. And at the end of each chapter, it's kind of a challenge. And something that was in one of my weekly notes that I've written for 11 years. So there's hundreds of them, but that's how it came about. And I'm still doing it to this day. I spit one out. Actually, I spent last week for the theme, make lemon out of lemonade. It just so happened that was the weekly note that I wrote. So, because, we all face difficult times in our life. And I just want people to know that none of us are perfect. And we all need to be resilient in everything we do. And I'm here to support them.
I love that, audience. I hope you find his Stu Speak. Join that following so that you can get his emails weekly and you can also involve yourself in intentional living. Now, one of the things that I guess kind of buzz phrases that has come up recently, maybe in the last decade or so, is the work-life balance, right? And you're trying to balance your career and you're trying to balance your personal life and family and all of the activities and things that you want to do, right? And it can be very, very challenging because it seems like everything is important. Every single thing.
Right. Exactly.
And even when you kind of pick and choose, you're like, you kind of feel guilty sometimes. So what strategies do you recommend for maintaining that balance, but then while pursuing aspiration in both areas?
Yeah, and it is a balance. I think the word balance is the right thing. So if you want work-life balance, that pretends automatically that you have a family, right? But at least you have a spouse or a partner. And I will tell you that it first with me started with my partner, with my wife. And I had to, sit down with her. And there were times early in my career where I was traveling internationally. And I can think of a couple of instances when I was gone 2 weeks at a time. Because when I went to Europe, I stayed in Europe over the weekend, so I wouldn't have to fly back to go back the next week. And some people can look at me and say, well, Stu, that's not much of a work-life balance. Well, actually, it was a decision that my wife and I made a long time ago that I would pursue a career. She would be very supportive of my career, and we were a team. And in that team approach, we made decisions together. So the first thing I tell people is it's got to be decisions made together. I've worked long hours. I've had to work long hours in my career, sometimes because the job was demanding of that. But I always, and I will say always, when I was on the road, made sure that I had a phone call to the children. Back in the day, FaceTime didn't exist, and I wish it did, but it didn't. I every night went to bed and talked to each child and my wife and said, I loved you. And as I said earlier in the podcast, I gave up certain things to have work-life balance. Personal things I loved. I gave up golf for 20 years so I could be home on Saturdays with the children. Be on Sundays at the church with the children and not be at the golf course. That was something that was pretty easy decision to make. Some people might not be. For me, it was because I put family over my golf. But everything I did, and once again, it was a team decision. Team, me, wife, and I. We made those decisions together, and I think because of that, and I worked long hours. My children still say, "Dad." They remember Dad being involved in just about everything. I was a baseball coach. I was a support for my daughter and dance. Putting together the displays and everything. And I did everything I could to be supportive and be there for the children. And so that's what life's all about. It's working with your partner and making sure that you're in agreement on these things. If one person wants to go one way and the other wants to go another way, that work. So we had to work together as a team. And because of that, I felt like I had a great work-life balance, even though I weekly sometimes worked 50, 60, 70 hours a week. I was still able to get it done.
Yeah, I know that's one of the things that I struggle with most definitely. Getting my doctorate, I was divorced and had 3 boys, and I was just like, man, and I was placing these unrealistic expectations because I was like, no, I have to finish, but it took me 7 years, but I finished my doctorate, Because I started realizing, like, I'm the only one putting this deadline on myself.
And good for you. That's resilience and that's being intentional. I love that story because 7 years, and you got doctor after in front of your name, and not many people do, by the way.
Right.
So great, it's good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, actually. Well, lastly, and I hate that this conversation is coming to an end because it's been very insightful. So I really appreciate you. But lastly, what is one key takeaway you want the listeners to remember about being intentionally aiming high in their own lives?
The one thing I really want the listeners to think about is find whatever purpose it is that you want in your life. And purpose, we can call it goal, whatever it is. And make it a priority, take distractions away, and focus on achieving that. Small wins become big wins in your life. So take a small and make it a victory in your life. And it creates so much success as you learn to take those small victories. They seem to become big victories. So be very, very intentional what that purpose is, create your priorities, and go after it. And I think if we can all do that in our lives, truly intentional, purpose-led lives, it'd be a great world to live in, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Stu, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with the listeners and me. Your journey of resilience and your commitment to intentional living provide valuable lessons for all of us striving to achieve our aspirations. Our listeners who want to learn more about your work or get a copy of your book, Aim for the Uprights, the Intentional Playbook for Success in Faith, Family, and Business, how can they connect with you?
Well, very easy. The book is on Amazon, and you can certainly be purchased on Amazon. It's an audio, it's in hardback, and it's also on digital. As well as I have a website, Stu.com, and certainly you can contact me through that as well. So I really appreciate Dr. Rowe, you having me on and giving the opportunity to talk about intentional living with your listeners. So I thank you so very much.
Any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
Live a life intentional. And I know that sounds almost cliche after I've been talking about it, but be intentional about the things you do because they don't happen by accident. If you are intentional, good things will happen.
I love it. I love it. We are definitely going to focus on living an intentional life and intentional living. Thank you again for joining me on Life Dac, the Resilience Podcast. And Stu, I wish you continued success in your mission to inspire others.
Thank you, and likewise to you, Dr. Rowe.
Be sure to join us next time for more uplifting stories and insights on resilience. Until then, listeners, keep pushing forward, embrace the journey, and remember that every setback can lead to a greater comeback. Dr. Rowe signing off.
Hey, are you really loving this podcast, or did you really enjoy this week's episode? Then please subscribe, like, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. And remember to live, laugh, love, learn, and then repeat. See you in the next episode.